This is an exhibition called The Sacred Gift, Tradition and Modernity in the Spiritual Art of Nepal, and it's a show that I've put together for the Berkley Shambhala Center. The focus of this show is actually to bring together the best of traditional Newar art and modern Newar art to allow the viewer to really see the very finest work that's being created by the artists of the Kathmandu Valley. This show has brought together the top artists that are still doing this traditional style of painting, which has not changed for hundreds of years, with the top artists who are creating their new, innovative representations of gods and goddesses. Yantras are a bit difficult to explain and maybe understand. Now, in Hinduism, we'll have a specific deity, and the deity will have a physical form. So that could be described in text, or, you know, there's a specific form of a deity which will include the number of arms, the number of heads, the number of implements, the kinds of clothing that the deity is wearing and such. There'll often be a mantra or a sound associated with the deity as well. And then in many cases, you have a yantra as well. So this is a yantra, which is a symbolic form that encapsulates and communicates the energy of a specific deity. In this case, the Sri Yantra is the yantra or symbolic form of the goddess Tripura Sundari. It's believed by many to have the ability to draw wealth and power, strength, just be beneficial in all areas of life. So what we have here is 9 triangles that are interlocking and then forming 43 other triangles. The symbolism and the interpretation of the Sri Yantra is vast. Instead of going into too much of the philosophy behind the Sri Yantra, I want to communicate how this typifies more traditional Newar painting. These floral motifs that you see surrounding the central triangles, it is very typical of early Newar art, and many of the artists that are studying Newar painting, when they enter an apprenticeship, this kind of flourish is where many will begin. So it's kind of the foundation or the alphabet of Newar art. When an artist is able to do one of these floral motifs and the hand becomes accustomed to doing this, then the artist is able to do work like ornaments, clothing, waves, clouds, flowers. All of that comes from this original shape. This is a painting of the goddess Lakshmi by Komal, Narayan, Shrestha. And it's a fantastic example, again, of the classical style of Newar painting. Lakshmi is the goddess, she's a Hindu goddess, the goddess of wealth, abundance, beauty, all things very luxurious and auspicious and abundant. And Lakshmi is shown here seated on a lotus throne. And she has 4 hands. One hand is lowered in a gesture that is a gesture of boon bestowing. So sometimes in India, in Indian images, you would see gold coins spilling out of her hands. But here the hand is just lowered. This hand is raised. The fingers seem to be forming a mudra. Typically, Lakshmi's hand would be facing out to the viewer, which is the gesture of fearlessness, fear not. So a gesture, expression of protection. In her other 2 hands, in Nepal, she holds a mirror with which to gaze upon her own beauty, and the other hand holds a pot of sindoor. Sindoor is red powder that is often worn by married women in Nepal on their foreheads, and Lakshmi uses this red powder to decorate her face, her hands, and her feet. What makes this kind of more of a classical style painting is that we can see, as opposed to modern Newar paintings, that the image is a bit more flat, in the sense that while there's some effort towards shading and molding of the figure, for the most part, we don't have a whole lot of effort towards 3-dimensionality on the part of the artist. Another characteristic would be that the surface is all but covered with very, very fine, ornate detailing. Embellishments, these patterns, these floral motifs in her skirt, in the background, in the mandorla behind her. And if you look closely at the red sheet that hangs below the red lotus, there are these tiny medallions featuring the 8 auspicious symbols, which include the endless knot, the double fish, a conch shell, and a few others. On either side, there are 2 tortoises, or 2 turtles here, which is Lakshmi's vehicle. And these unusual characters up kind of next to her, there's like a blue sort of bird figure, and then this dancing monkey. The blue figure is dumping gold coins as an offering, and they're falling into a bowl next to the goddess. And then the white figure is lifting up kind of a basket full of what look like precious jewels. So these are her attendants. You could kind of understand them as like Santa's elves with these big bags full of treats. And there is a smaller lotus that rises up to serve as a seat for Lakshmi's foot. She's golden colored, gold being, you know, obviously an auspicious wealth color. And she's gazing out directly at the viewer. Now, with religious art in many traditions, there's more than just these two classifications, but many times we can look at works that are iconic and works that are more narrative. So an iconic image is one where the subject might be gazing out directly to the viewer and transmitting a kind of blessing for us, whereas a narrative image might have more of a scene taking place that would serve an educational purpose. This painting here by Amrit Dangol is a fantastic example of a modern Newar painting. This is an image of Padmapani Lokeshvara, is the Bodhisattva of compassion, as the lotus bearer. So you can see that he's holding a lotus flower in his left hand. What distinguishes this as a more modern work are a few very key elements. First of all, we see a variation of a black and white play here. We're not working with bright, saturated colors as you might often find in more classical Newar painting. We've got a much softer palette here. And it almost has the quality of a hand-colored photograph, which was actually quite popular in India and Nepal from the early 1900s through to the 1940s and 50s. Padmapani is one of the 108 forms of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara in the Kathmandu Valley. And here he's shown in his red form. He wears an antelope skin draped over his left shoulder. He's wearing these very special traditional ornaments that you'll see in many modern images of Avalokiteshvara. And we've got these mythic, fantastic dragons in the sky. Now, in Newar art, the dragons are believed to have bloodshot eyes, and that's because they're protectors. And they have bloodshot eyes because they're always protecting us, which means they never blink. They never blink their eyes, so their eyes become very dry and bloodshot. This is a painting of Chinnamasta, one of the 10 tantric wisdom goddesses of Hinduism. And it's painted by Sundar Sinkhwal, based on an original drawing by Udaycharan Shrestha. Chinnamasta is perhaps one of the most complex, enigmatic, perplexing deities of the Hindu tradition. And what we have here is Shiva and Parvati lost in making love with each other. What's unique to this composition that's particular to Chinnamasta's iconography is that in their lovemaking, Parvati, the female consort, is on top. So we have Parvati and Shiva making love, and from the energy of their sexual union, we have an image of Chinnamasta, this goddess with blood-red skin, firm, beautiful breasts, a narrow waist, thick, delicious thighs, dancing on their bodies with two young attendants next to her. And the story is that these attendants were very hungry and there was no food. So Chinnamasta cuts off her own head to feed her attendants. And what we have is blood pouring out of the three channels. Blood flows from Chinnamasta's neck into the two mouths of her attendants, and then from the central channel, the blood flows right back into her mouth. And she holds her severed head in a skull cup. Many people would say that all of the essence of tantric teaching can be found in this composition. The act of lovemaking is an image of creation or procreation. Chinnamasta destroying herself, killing herself, is an image of destruction. And then, of course, ingesting her own blood is an image of regeneration. So the whole cycle of existence is depicted in this image. He has made no efforts to simplify this composition. If you look very closely at the details behind Chinnamasta's body, some of those floral motifs that we find in classical Newar art are here used in a very different way. The mandorla is studded with these beautiful blue medallions and then surrounded by dried human skulls that we can see here. The whole thing takes place on a multicolored lotus, and then we have these witnesses. There's a yogi sitting outside of his cave, looking up at the scene, offering a fruit. We have a Nagini, a female cobra spirit, looking up at the scene as well with her hands clasped in prayer. A corpse burning on a pyre with crows, vultures, and howling dogs. And then we have a Buddhist stupa, and here a Shivalingam, which is a Hindu image here. So we have something very typical of the Kathmandu Valley. It's a blending of Hinduism and Buddhism. The sun and the moon both appear as well in the sky. One interpretation of this is that what we call in Sanskrit the Brahma Muhurta, which Brahma Muhurta means the ambrosial hours, and those are believed to be between 3 and 6 o'clock in the morning, which is the ideal time for any sort of spiritual practice. But it's also believed that that's the time that the deities come out and play. So by showing the sun and the moon there, the artist is showing that this is that space between night and day. The sun and the moon, also depicted as white and red, are representing duality and the union of duality. White, one could say white like semen, and red, red like menstrual blood. It's very important when we're looking at these paintings to understand something very crucial that makes this kind of work different from other kinds of art that you might be seeing. Now, my family comes from India, and we come from a sect of Hinduism that's called the Pushti Marg, which is the path of grace. And it's a tradition where we're known for really kind of worshiping images. Krishna, for example, is the primary god of our sect, and in our tradition we have an image of Krishna, and he has various outfits and jewelry and adornments, ornaments. And so we relate to these images of the deities, and there's supposed to be this kind of transmission that takes place. So what makes this work so important and very different is this is actually functional art. This is work that has a very specific purpose. It has the capacity to transform the viewer, to inspire the viewer. And so I feel that it's a very important piece when looking at this work to take away from the images after seeing them, that they're more than just beautiful images of unusual and bizarre deities, but there's actually, this is a reality that in the Hindu and Buddhist traditions people believe is a reality far more real than the world that we live in.